Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Nate. I am here today. We have a special presentation. Typically we come on Fridays, but we're doing a special presentation this Monday. I met this young man that we have as a guest today, Mr. Taqee. I said it right. Uh, I met this young man, and we had an awesome discussion about learning styles. And as an educator, I have learned that our communication is often off track because we don't understand each other's learning style. And I see the two things really connecting. But Taki was able to explain it to me in a way that my teaching courses never did. My years in a classroom has yet to, show me. But he helped me to also understand what I was doing naturally. Uh, Definitely um, connected to how I reach my students as it pertains to how he was explaining it. So what I was naturally doing was in line with how he explained it. I just didn't know what I was basically what I was doing. And I think a lot of educators, a lot of parents, and a lot of us as individuals don't understand how to get that right. So I wanted to bring Taki on today to basically as an introductory conversation and how to um, one, identify learning styles, identify your own learning styles, and use that as a benefit in our conversations with each other and us, the way we teach our children, the way we raise our children, the way we have relationships as adults across the board. So, this intro conversation, and I hope to have several more in line with this as we partner with Taki and helping him push his message. Um, in line with helping us to better communicate. For me, I see it as a communication. Today's topic is in line with that because it's communicating into, say it again,
Communication into translation.
into translation. So for me, I'm a communications major, and I love communicating. Is what I do for a living. But I want to learn to do it more effectively in my relationships, in my work, in my teaching, in my listening. Before we always look at ourselves going out, but we never see that information coming back in. So definitely in our listening skills. So I'm gonna one ask Mr. Taki to introduce himself, let us know who he is, what he does, and then we can jump right into the conversation.
Thank you. My name is Taqee. I am mostly known as a barber. Been cutting hair well over probably about a little bit over 20 years. So I deal with a lot of the public. I'm always dealing with the public. That's my profession, to deal with the public and to get deep and personal with people of all walks of life, all ages. Um, I've been blessed to be able to have the type of relationships and communications with people on such a large scale. Being a barber, being a trusted confidant, um, trusting just therapy type of styles, from all ages, men and women, and dealing directly within the communication style within the community, straightforward, um, and having to exercise being capturing my what I call a center person. Being working in a barbershop, you have to find your center person that is adaptable to all different aspects of personalities, and being as a server to all of the different types of personalities. And this has given me a huge platform in order to experiment and test my communication and translation techniques to get the data and the evidence needed to solidify these techniques and that I'm presenting. Um, this technique that I be presenting came to me from a very desperate and low aspect of my life, stemming from failure of two relationships with two mothers of my children. Also, different aspects walking throughout my life, but definitely that case brought upon a need for a change, a need for clarity and accuracy and being able to communicate. And with a change of diet, consistency, and pain, I sat down at the kitchen table one day, and as if a voice was, as if somebody was standing next to me telling me to do something like a math problem, I sat down in the kitchen table and wrote down patterns and these shapes that describe my being, my learning style, my teaching style, my memorization style, and my present moment style. And once it was written, once I wrote it down and when it was told to me how to read it and understand it, it blew my mind because I couldn't find any fault in it. And then I learned from that technique how it was introduced to me from within me. I started introducing it to others, and the same results I was getting. So I labeled it communication in the translation because I don't think in society we have a communication problem. I think we have a translation problem, and that's because everybody has a different relationships to the very words that we use every day. So we can hear the word good, we can hear the word bad, but what we're not communicating to one another is the relationship that we have with those words. So we're assuming that everybody's hearing this, everybody's experience to those words is the same as others just because the sound is relative, which is the communication.
So, in our conversation, you did this questionnaire with me, a short questionnaire. Can we kind of replicate that right now so we can just jump right into how you assess this and how we then can learn to pick up on it? So you've come up with a few questions that you ask someone in communicating with them just to assess their learning style.
Mhm.
So can you give us that process a little bit?
All right, so I asked a total of 4 questions. Well, actually, it's a total of 3 questions. The fourth one I don't have to ask because it reveals within itself. And the question that I asked is if I was to teach a person something that they do not know exists, meaning that the conversation that we're about to have or engaging in is something about me that you do not know. So I'm going to be presenting information, which is something that is being taught because everything that you don't know, I'm teaching, whether it's a thought that I have or a feeling that I have, is still being taught. And that aspect is coming from an existence that you do not even know exists.
Mm-hmm.
So then I ask, how would you want me to teach it to you? Would you want me to tell you? Would you want me to show you? Would you want me to get you involved? Or would you want me to break it down? And based off the answer that the person gives to me, I can hear, because I'm an auditorial learner, I can hear the answer no matter which form they ask it in, even if they don't go in the pattern in which the options in which I give it. I
Mm-hmm.
can still hear the answer in the way they try to describe their answer
Mm-hmm.
because the answer that they give is going to lead with either them putting value to either they have to hear it, see it, get involved, or have it broke down based off the terminologies that they use in their descriptions, trying to answer the question. So there's no
Okay.
wrong answer to the question. You're automatically going to tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I understand the first answer. The second question I ask is if you are to teach me something that I do not know exists, meaning that your thoughts and your feelings, which we call an opinion, is something that I do not know exists. And if you were to teach me the aspects of what I do not know exist, are you going to show me that they exist, tell me that they exist, get me involved in what exists, or provide the steps into what exists? And based off the answer that I give, the answer that is given to me, I'm going to be able to understand what type of teacher you are. And therefore, this reveals to me the way that you give information. So therefore, I know how to receive the information.
Okay.
And the third question is, when it comes to your memory, based off of because there's only 4 teaching styles. It operates up under the law of 4. So the first 2 questions eliminate the 4, 2 out of the 4 types of styles you can have. You're only left with 2 options when you get to the memorization question. And I always ask, when it comes to your memory, do you remember out of the options that's left? Do you remember what you heard? Do you remember what you felt? Do you remember what you saw? Or do you remember the events that took place? And I can hear the way a person answers the question, what type of memory that they have based off the terminology they use describing it. Because as soon as they hear memory, they go into the aspect of memory. So then they start communicating in the language of which their memory is. And then it reveals to me their memorization style, which is the way they remember information. And once this reveals to me, I know they automatically know what their present moment is because it leaves only one more option out of the 4 left. And once I know these placements, I then know how to communicate with that person accurately, because I know when they're communicating to me their thoughts. I know when they're communicating to me something that they've learned, that they're learning at the moment. I know when they're communicating to me something that they're teaching. And I know when they're communicating their present existence.
So for me, you said that I was more of a experienced learner,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to remember the last part. I think you said that I learn from the steps that I see, or I'm involved.
You're an involved learner.
Evolved, right?
You are a visual teacher. Step by step memory, cyclical memory, and auditorial presence.
So you have a way of starting your communication with someone, and you say, uh, and it is different based off of what your teaching style and my learning style, or vice versa. So when you communicate with me, how do you address it?
All right. So with me knowing that you are what they call textile or an experienced learner, hands-on, you use your feelings. Your feelings is learning. You is when you're expressing your emotions, or what they call feelings, or your involvement in touching in something. That is all learning for you. That's how you learn.
Right.
So because I know that that's your learning style, I have to address your learning style first if I'm going to teach you anything. I can't teach you anything until I can acknowledge the way that you learn, because that's the door. And then I communicate my teaching style to let you know who is entering through that door. So therefore, you know what it is that you're learning. So with you being a experienced learner, a hands-on textile learner, and I am a process, step-by-step cyclical teacher. I teach the movement of things, the order in which things go. When I'm communicating to you, I would say experience. As soon as you hear the word experience, it puts you into this magnetic position of receptivity. And what I'm telling you is to experience the process. So
So
therefore,
experience this process because you are a process teacher,
right.
right? Okay. Now, now I'm sure there are variations depending on who you're speaking to, but as a teacher, should I do that every time I'm addressing a student? As a parent, should I do that every time I'm addressing my child? In communication, should I do that every time I'm communicating with another adult, a friend, relationship, whatever? Should I do that? Should I follow that same routine whenever I'm talking?
Um, Listen to this process, organize this process, experience this process, watch this process. You should do it with every person that you come in contact with, just as well as we say hello and goodbye to every person that we come in contact with.
Mm. So at the start of the conversation, I get them by saying that. So for you, you said experience this process to me.
Mhm.
How should I address you back?
All right, experience this process. Because I am an auditorial learner and
Mm-hmm.
you are a visual teacher, then you will address my learning style to have a magnetic effect on me. So you would say listen, because the word listen triggers me into a magnetic pull.
Mm-hmm.
And then you will represent what I'm going to listen to, which is visual, because you're a visual teacher. You will say view. So now I am listening to the view. And
Mm-hmm.
then you communicate what needs to be communicated, and it translates to me what is visually present in auditorial knowledge.
Now, many of us are doing this without knowing it. It's how the most effective communicators are already doing this, but they may not necessarily know what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're not coming from an educational background.
Mm-hmm.
You don't typically understand that. How can we normalize people identifying the traits that they are doing that are effective, and what you say is translation into, well, communication into translation, but you see the issue being more of an issue of translation rather than a breakdown in communication.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I adopt your method into my everyday language? So I'm in a class of 20 some students at any given time. How do I effectively do that for each child?
Experience this process. The first thing that has to be there is the will.
Mhm.
Nothing can be done without the will first. The will must be there.
Mhm.
Once the will is there, the next thing is acknowledgement of the steps and the importance of the value of those steps.
Mhm.
Once you establish the importance of the value of those steps, you apply that aspect by addressing each learning style of a person's when talking to a class, by simply knowing that there are four different types of learning styles, and there
Mhm.
is only one type of teaching style, which is you, because you are the teacher. So it's one teaching style and four learning styles.
Mhm.
So all you have to do, experience this process, is remember the four learning styles and remember your teaching style. And you address the room as such. For you, because you're visual, all you have to do is just remember, start with feeling. Feel
Okay.
this view, because that's your learning style, feel. So you just remember how your placements is, and you just address the placements in you, which is addressing everybody.
Okay.
So since you're experiencing this process, you know you learn through feeling, you address your learning style first of all, the ones that learn like you. You say, feel this view. Now you got all of the people that learn from grabbing attention. Then
Mhm.
you go to your teaching style, which is visual, and you would say to the classroom, watch this view. Now you got all of the ones that are visual learners attention. Then you go to the way that you remember, which is cyclical, organize. Organize this view. Now you got all of the ones that are rhythmic, process learners. And then you go to your present moment, which is sound. Listen to this view. Now you have the total class attention.
How has this been beneficial when working with your own children or with children in general for you?
Uh, Experience this process. It's been so beneficial that I have not found the actual words to describe something of that greatness. It
Mm,
is simply something that when each person applies it in their life, the aspect of not having words to express it will
mm,
be collectively shared because the experience holds so much volume. It's going to take a couple of cycles to find the words to communicate that which is so totally brand new from life.
mm. Do you see this? So when we began to have a conversation, I guess I immediately took the learning style and just went right to my teacher mode because as a teacher, it can be very distracting and very just difficult across the board to not be able to capture the attention of the class as a whole. When you're teaching certain subjects, like music or theater, it's ways of you can see the learning styles coming out much easier. But a teacher that's simply lecturing a student or students, it's much more difficult because you have all the children in a kind of an auditorium type of setting where they're sitting down and they're receiving what you're teaching. You can see the different personalities, kind of the child that's off, out of the window, or the child that's fidgeting, or the child that's talkative, or the child that's going to sleep. You see that, but addressing the different learning styles in that moment is triggering to a lot of teachers because you're trying to make sure every child is getting the information that's necessary in terms of how we introduce ourselves to the class initially, and what you're saying will make the total difference. So that first day of class, that first couple classes that you may have with those students, how should I, one, address this information that you're giving us, and two, apply it? How do I initially apply it?
All right. Experience this process. Number one, we have to acknowledge like what it is that we're actually teaching.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what we're teaching is being received from a certain type of teacher.
Okay.
That teacher may be a feeling teacher, may be a visual teacher, auditory, or a process teacher. So automatically we're getting 1/3 of the information out based off the subject matter in which we're teaching in, the type of teacher that you're quoting from to give to them.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right. So for example, you teach music, right?
Mm-hmm.
I experienced this process. When teaching music, there's also auditorial information that comes with music, which is the sound. Then you got visual representation of the music, which is the pictures. Then you got cyclical information, which is the space and the pattern. And then you have the experience aspect of the music, which is the collective aspect of being in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at the teaching aspect of it, it's the amount of auditorial sound more dominant than the visual representation of the knowledge, the cyclical information of the knowledge, and the involvement part of the knowledge.
Okay.
So this becomes the rough edge of it right there, because if we have auditorial abundance, but we don't have enough visual context that is the exact amount of visual as the amount of information auditorially, or we have not enough pattern sequential information as much as we got the visual, which is not complementing the experience. So these are the realities that we're trying to balance out here.
Okay.
This what makes it. This what makes the part complicated. Just seeing the truth for the way the information is actually here. All right. So experience this process when communicating to a classroom. Addressing the learning style turns the feeling, because you're a feeling teacher, is only turning the feeling information into the different learning styles. So they're getting the abundance of the feeling knowledge.
Okay.
They're still needing the value, the sound, they're still needing the visual, and they're still needing the step by step.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're ultimately going to be getting is the experience that you wanting them to feel. So they're going to see it, they're going to hear it, they're going to get involved with it. That's still 1/3 of the whole picture of understanding. So we're trying to get into the fact of total understanding. So when you're teaching a class, you have to not only use those steps, but then when you're drawing something on the board, you're still saying, listen to this. Listen to this view, organize this view, experience this view, watch this view, organize this view, listen to this view. I mean, that's right, because you're a visual teacher. So you're giving them the
Mm-hmm.
visual knowledge, my bad. So you're giving them the visual information. But when you're writing it down, you're still reciting it to keep their attention, because
Yeah.
you're breaking it down into the different forms. But you're breaking down into the different forms of it. So it becomes challenging, and this is when diet becomes a factor. Because in order to achieve this type of accuracy, we have to actually have control over our behavior. And then we're looking at experience this process. The children are being able to understand you, but if they're on Pop Tarts and Snicker bars and honey buns,
Mm-hmm.
their attention span becomes shorter, because they're getting this processed sugar causes impulsive behavior, twitching and nerve damage, memory loss. So then you're dealing with chemical imbalances in the process of them getting the information, so they'll be able to get it, but in short bursts.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're trying to give the information back also with short bursts. So the information is accurately starting to be communicated, but we have to also keep in mind the dietary aspect that plays a part on the body's being able to receive and digest information too. The
Mm-hmm.
information we definitely getting there, but we have to, when we're talking about actually total control of the classroom, where we have to incorporate diet into it as well, associated with this knowledge too.
It just seems, and from our conversations, I'm understanding one where I went wrong all these years, um, and how we contribute to um, Nia says hello. Um,
Hello, Nia.
and I get how we miss, because it's so many factors that break down our, in your words, translation, how I see it, communication. It's so many factors, whether I got enough sleep that night, whether you ate a good breakfast that morning, whether I'm feeling depressed, where my emotions are. There's so many factors that go into how we effectively communicate. And I don't know why I keep seeing that word communication in this, but and that's how I was able to bring it out of the classroom, because in natural ways, as an artist, I've learned how to, in many ways, entertain and educate at the same time. I've learned how to do that. You gotta, keep it moving with children, and just keep, short, like you said, short bursts of education. Give them a break, bring them back, and just do that. In adult conversations, that don't necessarily work. In a boardroom, or in an interview process, or just communicating with a friend, that doesn't, just walking away for a second, giving them a moment to take in what you're saying. um, you don't always get that time to break it down. So in our adult life as two adults, how do we bring that out of the classroom and into maybe our parenting styles, maybe our interpersonal relationships, our business relationships? How do we, and I know it's probably a little different for each one of those things, but can you speak in general? How do we adapt these processes into our relationships?
All right. Okay. So listen to this process, organize this process, experience this process, watch this process. We can this technique goes into our relationships because our relationships are still based around the way a person teaches, the way a person learns, the way a person remembers in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's all we're talking about, we're either talking about something that we're thinking about, which is our past and future. We're either talking about what we feel, which is our present moment, or we're communicating what we teach, which is information that we like to give, or we're communicating that we're learning, which is something that is happening at the very moment. There's nothing else simply to communicate on. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is that we get more caught into the communication of it instead of the translation of it. So,
Can you define those two so we can see the difference?
all right, listen to this process, organize this process, experience this process, watch this process. Communication is hello, goodbye, see you later. We can hear that. That's communication.
Mm-hmm.
Translation is the way you felt from what was being spoke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the translation. We don't have a problem with communicating. We have a problem with the translation, the
Right.
way we felt from what was being said.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part that we're ultimately trying to communicate, because this is really the part of our this is the part of communicating that holds the most value.
The
It is
translation.
that behind the scenes, and
Mm.
we haven't been taught how to communicate that part, so it becomes argumentative,
Mm.
or we shy away from it, or it becomes frustrating because we haven't practiced the vocabulary to express that. And
Mm-hmm.
using these techniques allow us to create the vocabulary to communicate that aspect which we haven't been successfully able to communicate.
So in our communications, when we were talking, I said to you, um, I had just had a really bad argument, literally that day that we first met. So you explaining this to me was like, where the hell were you like 5 hours ago? Because I needed you to referee this. But in my case, the frustrating part for me is because I'm a feeler, when I'm in arguments with individuals, it frustrates me to no end that I'm not being listened to, but rather my feelings are being measured. So you're not hearing what I'm
Mm,
saying, you're measuring my feelings or trying to measure my feelings.
mm,
And it's my feelings are normally so far removed from what I'm saying that that frustrates me. So people are trying to navigate like, are you mad or are you angry, or I just feel them translating what I'm saying into feelings, and I'm like, what are you doing? Now you said to me, because that person learning, their learning style is to feel,
mm,
and that's how they're receiving what I'm saying or translating what I'm saying rather.
mm.
So
Well,
not to ask the question of who's right or who's wrong, but why does that happen? Why do I get frustrated, and why do they measure my feelings instead of listening to what I'm saying? Or how do I get them to listen to what I'm saying versus stop measuring my feelings?
all right. So listen to this process, organize this process, experience this process, watch this process. When you're communicating your feelings, you are in the auditorial aspect of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You are auditorial present. So you use your ability to speak in order to bring existence. Like speaking for you is your feeling.
Mhm. Mhm.
So therefore, this is the aspect of yourself you are most unconscious of as well.
Okay.
So therefore, when you are speaking, which is bringing forth the experience, which is your present moment, which you are the most unconscious of, a person that is learning from that, which now I'm thinking about, there may be an auditorial learner, which they learn from the way their learning style is auditory, so they are able to really pick up on what's the value of what you're speaking on, and they're communicating that part, and it becomes frustrating because they may be a step-by-step teacher.
Mhm.
And when they're learning from your presence, which you're not trying to teach them about your present, use your ability to communicate. Your feeling is sound. What you teach is feeling, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So visual. What you teach is visual. So they're not actually learning what you're teaching them, which is the visual, because they're not a visual learner, they're auditorial. So what
Okay.
they're naturally taking from you is the present moment, which you are most unconscious of. And
How
they're
I
taking
feel.
that part of the information and then they're giving it to you.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because that's not what you're teaching, but because of their learning style, that's what they're learning, and they're making you become conscious of something you're not conscious of, not wanting to accept right now. That is
Mhm.
definitely there because you really trying to get them to see, not actually to
Feel.
feel.
Right. Right. So how do I in that first of all, I need you to be my the person that stands beside me at all moments. I need I need that first of all. I have to make enough money so I can afford you. Uh but and I think you missed your call. I think you need to be a therapist, not a barber. But I also in that frustrating moment for me, I see that happening. And what is most what takes it up another notch is I try to switch that around. So I become calmer, which then pisses them off because now there are no feelings for them to manage. Like they're
Mm.
not taking that in.
What happens right there? I'm explaining you that part, that switch that we call a switch, right? Listen to this process, organize this process, experience this process, watch this process. The switch is, remember, in the beginning you are in the sound, and sound is what your feeling is.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're calling the switch is, we're only communicating really two aspects. Either we're communicating a feeling or we're communicating a thought. So when
Mm-hmm.
what you call the switch, and the reason why you call it a switch is because you are step-by-step memory. So then the
Okay.
switch represents motion. So then you came out of the feeling and went into the logic. You
Mm-hmm.
started to break it down. You started to compartmentalize. You started to put it in cycles. You
Mm-hmm.
went out of the value and put it into the motion. And
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying is the motion got them frustrated because they probably wasn't auditorial learner. And when you start putting it into motion, they
Mm-hmm.
probably was step-by-step experience. So when you start putting things in that part of when you start communicating that part, it threw them into the present moment where they got frustrated because they were just in a
Yeah.
learning moment, and you switched them into what they call their feeling now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, there is not frustrating with you, but it's the lingo has changed and shifted them into a different aspect of themselves. You threw them into the present because when you start talking step by step cycles, the only way they understand step by step cycles is only in their present moment. And because they're not conscious of that aspect of themselves, it could tend to be frustrating to be communicating or being vibrated in a part of yourself you're unconscious of, but we don't know
Mm.
how to communicate that part besides giving off this and all of that, because we haven't been taught the verbal communication style of emotional language.
Wow. Wow. Okay. It sir, I need you to do this more often. I need you to do this every day if you can. Just go live from the chair. But it is in that moment. Typically, I don't hold on to feelings. Well, I won't say feelings. I don't hold on to emotions. So once I'm mad and I'm pissed, and typically when I take a deep breath, it's over. So I have a tendency of wanting to finish what I started with someone instead of just walking away and just washing my hands. So in terms of communicating in general for people, I'm trying to figure out how do I identify their learning style, and I would call it how they hear, how they obtain information, so I can adjust myself. And then how do I adjust myself? So in that scenario that I just gave you, instead of me getting really calm because I notice you looking too much into my passion, my feelings, my emotions, I then drop my energy. So I'm now calmly speaking to you. So there's because in my way that will help them to hear me, but it doesn't because it just makes them mad because now they think I'm being facetious or I'm trying to play mind games. When you get calm, I don't know why people do that, but that's what happens. But how do I adjust myself in that moment to be able to become aware of that person's learning style so I can shift effectively?
All right. Listen to this process, organize this process, experience this process, watch this process. This is where the aspect becomes very, very tricky because I know that it is possible to do it, but what I'm learning is the only way to get the answers in which we need is we have to be able to ask the questions correctly.
Okay.
And when we ask the questions correctly, the person has to also have the ability to answer the questions correctly because the answer is a pattern. All
Mm-hmm.
right. So when answering this question, I have to be considerate of the way that you remember things.
Okay.
Because what I'm going to have to do is ask for you to remember, which means I'm gonna have to ask you events because I know that you are event cyclical memory. So now I know that you have event type memory. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna have to trigger your memory by connecting the right wording with what represents your memory, which is events.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm connecting the events, I'm going to have to also acknowledge the way that you teach because I'm asking you to remember something from your past. And from you remembering that from your past, connecting you to being able to see it. While seeing it, I want you to embrace what you are learning at that moment, feeling
Mm-hmm.
it. Because
Mm-hmm.
you have to feel it from whatever is being shown to you. That's where you get the feeling from. And at that moment of what you feel, I want you to put the auditorial aspect of your present moment into the answer. So
Mm-hmm.
this is me having to practice knowing your placements in order to answer the question. Because if I don't know your placements and I say, well, how does it look to you when somebody, if I say look, I'm throwing you into teaching, but I'm disregarding your memory, but I'm trying to connect you to memorization, but you're not visual memory, you're visual teacher. So I had to communicate your memorization style, and I have to put everything in its proper place for the answer to come correctly to you. I just can't say it based off my understanding of it. This is what the Bible is saying, not least not lean on your own understanding. This is
Mm-hmm.
what they were trying to communicate, meaning that you know your understanding, but acknowledge the placements within that individual, communicate to them in their form of the same way it exists within you.
So in communicating with me, and us having some similarities but definite differences, how are you communicating with me in this moment? So how are you following your instructions in your communications with me? If you can remember those conversations or even this one.
Um, Listen to this process, organize this process, experience this process, watch this process. I know that you're a visual teacher, so every time you speak, I repeat the mantra in my mind, listen to this view. So therefore, everything that you're communicating to me, I fully grasp it and understand in the way that I learn so I don't miss anything. And
Okay.
I make sure that when I'm communicating with you, I acknowledge your learning style by saying, experience this process. So therefore, everything that I'm communicating to you, you're getting accurately. So I'm making sure that I'm communicating accurately to you, and I'm making sure that everything you communicate to me, I'm doing the part within myself to communicate it. So it's like if you're talking to person, they may not acknowledge your learning style, but when you know your learning style and your teaching style, you can automatically do it within yourself, and they can still be, you know what I'm saying? But when you use the format, what you actually experience is freedom of speech. So
Mm.
without using the format, you're denying yourself of freedom of speech. You're being bondage.
Say that
You're
part
being
again. When
enslaved.
I'm not doing.
Experience this process when you're not practicing saying the mantra of my learning style and your teaching style.
Okay.
You're enslaving yourself to your speech, because what happens is you're trying, when you're giving information, it's like you're going to try to make sure you feel what you make sure you feel what it is you are showing to make sure it is correct,
Okay.
as if the truth came to you in that same form in which you're trying to edit it by seeing and feeling to make sure it's leaving you in the right form. That's
Mm.
bonding, that's keeping you enslaved to the truth, because the truth is one aspect. So once you get it and you start doing, trying to make sure it's the certain type of way, it's no longer actually what was given to you. You become enslaved to the edit.
Mm.
So therefore, you don't actually experience freedom of speech. So you don't really feel fulfilled after you ask or you communicate something. It's almost like maybe I left something out or I wasn't able to, because you're bonded to that. You're enslaved.
So right now, I should be saying experience this process.
Experience this process. You would say, listen to this view.
Listen to this video. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When someone's speaking to me, I should listen to this view.
Right. When speaking, when us having a experience this process, with us having a conversation, you would say, listen to this view to me, because I'm an auditorial learner and
Mm.
you're a visual teacher. So therefore, you experience being free of your speech, because usually when you're communicating to yourself, you're actually communicating, experience this view. That's your way of editing it, because that's the way you learn and teach. So when you're giving information, you're practicing your learning and teaching style on yourself with information that's coming from yourself already known. So it's
Mm.
like trying to be truth two times. You know, it's only gonna be one time. It's already within you. So it doesn't really have to be edified if it's already experienced within you. So it's like really the part where we're putting the edification is the lack of acknowledging a person's learning style, which inside of us translates into edification because we don't know. But when we actually do know, we apply it, then we put in that energy into its right place and we're putting the law to it, and therefore we actually experience what that energy is there meant to do for us.
Man, I'm telling you, since we first talked and the conversations that we've had since that first time, it has really forced me to focus not only when I'm teaching, but when I'm listening in a different way than what I've already been. And even though I listen to what people are saying, I'm listening when they're having a conflict with me, because now I'm starting to see the difference in how they received what I said. I told you before, um, my biggest pet peeve is when someone is listening to you or you're talking to someone and they say, I don't understand what you're saying. And to me, I automatically go to a space of I'm not listening to you. That's how I translate what they're saying. That's what that means to me when you say you don't understand me. It's you're not listening to me. And I never saw that as a means of, it's not that you don't understand what I'm saying. How I'm saying it to you is what is affecting you, not necessarily what I'm saying.
Right,
And I'm saying anything at all.
right.
So now I can clearly see that where I'm at is what do I do now?
Yeah. So experience this process. You in the beginning stages of this information
Mm-hmm.
being planted in you and started to grow now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like these are the beginning stages of, now that you have had this type of conversation, you can no longer just hear things the way that it once, well, not actually hear, but experience this process. You can no longer experience life the same no more, which is causing you to see things differently. And because you're seeing things differently and it's cycling, it's causing
Mm.
your value system to change.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And it so this seems, as a teacher, this seems like it's going to be the hardest thing ever. Like I'm separating my classroom like I would separate the musical sections. That's what this, when I envision this is what is happening to me.
Yeah.
I also see a lot of name tags with learning styles written on them, and you're nodding your head, but teachers don't get paid that much.
Hey,
But I understand the work that would have to go into that, and how easy it will make the rest of that school year. Whew. It just feels overwhelming. It feels overwhelming when you're saying I need to do this when we're having a one-on-one conversation. But I'm thinking about parents having to do this, teachers having to do this, employers having to do this, and how just the amount of work that it seems like it not so not now not only do I have to do this, not only do I have to learn your IEPs, I now have to learn your learning style. But one thing that probably would help with your IEP, because then now give me a that's kind of like a extra thing that I have to learn. But how would a teacher do this? How? Or a
hey,
parent even?
experience this process. Welcome to the Noah show. Experience this process. I'm in the same boat, because with me bringing forth this information, just like you can see that, like I'm looking at it like bringing it to each person in each field, and for them to be able to apply it into their life, and thinking about how many people need this in every aspect of every corner of life. How is it going to
Mm-hmm.
happen? How's it going to
Mm-hmm.
do it? It just starts with, I got to get it out there. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
each person joining in is a hard road. But we can, one thing about this road is, experience this process. We could clearly see that it's gold at the end of this one. We don't need a belief system for it. That's the difference between anything else that's given to us of a path to travel. This is a path that proves itself,
Yeah.
that you don't even have to go, you don't have to go a whole long mile on it. Once you step foot on it, it's already proven to yourself the value and how it changes your life. So it's really an exercise of strength of will when it comes to this one.
But is it a way for me to determine your learning style or teaching style without asking you those questions?
Experience, listen to this process, organize this process, experience this process, watch this process. Yep. And it's gonna come from you experiencing it, you
So patterns.
seeing it, and
Mm-hmm.
you doing it over and over, and
Mm-hmm.
then placing the value to those situations. And
Mm.
that value is going to reveal to you. The greater the value, the greater the picture.
Okay. Because
And
I'm laughing in my head, but I had the experience, and I went back to all of our conversations, and I just kept saying, "I'm not going to do this in this moment. I'm not going to do this." And I was getting really frustrated with the person. I was trying to keep my calm, and I just said, I asked him the first question you asked me: if I was to show you something, how would you want me to show it? How would you want to, or how would you? what was the question? If I was to show you something, how would you want to learn it?
Yeah, it is experience part. You saying show, I use teach, but it's still the same thing for because you are a visual teacher. So when you
Right.
say show, you're still communicating teach.
So it's me listening to words. That's another way of me figuring out what your learning style is. Because
The
typically
words is
you
gonna
don't say it
place you
without.
the
You gotta show me what yours is based off of word choice.
yeah, it's gonna based off word choice, it's gonna reveal to you the value.
Mm.
And
So that it is.
once
It's
that
not.
value,
It's probably not as typical, but it's probably a large sum of people because I know a lot of people who are auditory learners,
mm.
and they all, whenever they're explaining to, they always say, "Listen to this," and I've been able to catch on to that, but it just seems like the other ones are because here in the United States, typically we learn about the three learning styles. And I believe the organization one is the one that we don't typically learn about.
So all right, so the ones with all right, so experience this process. The ones that you hear that always come to you and be like, listen to this,
Mm-hmm.
they're not auditorial learners, they're auditorial teachers.
Teachers, right,
Like
right,
me, I'm auditorial learner, but when I'm bringing information to a person, I don't never tell them listen. I'm a step by step. So I'll be like, check this out.
right.
It's putting
Okay,
something in motion, checking, you know what I'm saying, like a step.
right.
You know what I'm
Like
saying?
a
A person
list.
that's a feeler, they be like, feel, you know what I'm saying, get this right here. You know what I'm saying? They
Mm,
get you involved or man, watch this.
okay.
Visual teacher. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying?
So
Uh,
we kind of are telling you how we teach. Now,
right.
what about the learning style? How do we know? How? What are some ways that we can and finish with the teaching one as well? But what are some ways that we can tell either way? Now, you just given us some examples, and if we think about it, we've said those things or we've heard somebody say those things, and they were basically telling us how they teach. But what are some ways to also do that with the learning style?
Experience, listen to this process, visualize this process, experience this process, watch this process. When it comes to the learning style, people you tend to use words like I could tell that this person is this and that. When they're saying I can tell, that's an auditorial learner. I can tell. Or a
I
person
can
like, well,
tell.
you can see, that's visual. Or I can feel, that's a get involved person. Or the way this thing going, they're
Right,
step by step. So
right.
they're letting you know that that type of sound, that sentence is a receptive one. That's magnetic. That's a magnetic sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell. I can feel. You can feel. You know what I'm saying? How this is
Mm-hmm.
going. Like this means that this is right now being downloaded.
Mm.
So those are the learning styles. So we're experiences probably we're already talking in those phrases. We just haven't captured them and compartmentalized this aspect. This is what I mean, the translation part of it. But
Right.
we've been taught as the communication part. We can hear it. We know when a person says we are aware that people say these things, but we're not translating them into what is a magnetic sentence, what is a teaching sentence, what is a memorization sentence, and what is present moment sentence.
And the reason, and so I see those things now. I'm starting to, okay, now I'm listening for the word choices.
You see how you just used the word now I'm listening? All
Yeah.
right, so experience this process. Remember, you are auditorial present. Your
Mm-hmm.
feeling, your present moment is auditorial. So it's no coincidence that when you say the word now means present moment, you
Mm-hmm.
say the word listen for
Okay.
sound because
Mm-hmm.
you're communicating your present moment, your existent, which would be
Mm-hmm.
your feeling. So it's no coincidence that you say it now and then listen after it because
And
it's
there are
just
a lot of common things that happen amongst us, like people who choose to read between the lines, like they're trying to find meaning and put your words together. People who listen to every other word versus listening to the whole thing. I'm trying to understand how those things, those type of patterns will lead me to understand you in a different way where I'm okay, now I know how to respond. Now I know how to direct a question or how to communicate what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking or how to convey to you something important without you going in another direction with it or just tuning it out or not listening at all. So I'm trying to effectively communicate with people on their level of understanding or translation. So it's not, and that's the part about all this that you're saying to me. That's the part that I'm still trying to learn and get from you. How do we effectively translate on the same frequency with each other or learn to get as close as possible?
Okay. Experience this process. This requires for us to go into the logic and slow down the movement.
Mm. So what I said to you earlier when I said I decided to calm down and speak slowly, you said I think you said that's what I was doing, but I went too much into the movement for that person.
See, all right, so experience the process. You did right. You did calm down in the movement. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the first part. I experience process. When you calm down in the movement, you embrace yourself in the feeling of the calm down.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right. When you embrace yourself in the feeling of the calm down, then you look. And when you look, you hear.
Yeah.
And what you hear is exactly what is really being communicated. And it's totally different
Mm-hmm.
from what you was assuming in the faster pace
Right.
of the predictive style.
So what is a scenario where this does not work? Or is there a scenario where this could possibly not work?
Experience this process. It works in majority, it works in the scenario when we come into the lack of uh friction,
Mm-hmm.
fuzziness, right?
Mm-hmm.
It works because breathing, every breath is connected to an emotion. So with the slowdown of the process and embracing the feeling
Mm-hmm.
and then looking gives you a more deeper breathing style. And with the
Mm-hmm.
more deeper breathing style, you're taking in more oxygen flow, more stimulation to the brain, more ability to digest information more wholly. So therefore, you actually hear what exactly is being communicated. You may have thought that the communication was about the particular subject that you're talking about, but really what that person is communicating to you may be that they are just frustrated, and you need to communicate on the frustration. Let go of the subject and get to the communication of the frustration, because they
Mm-hmm.
can't understand the subject if they can't work through the frustration. And the
Right.
ultimate goal is to get understanding, so you have to meet the person where they are.
Mm. I Does this help you to eliminate or decrease the amount of arguments you get into?
Oh yeah, for sure. Now experience this process. I'm in a state now where arguments are choice. Like they're simply truly our choice. Like I'm not finna be controlled, like just let off of my impulse to just argue because I'm upset or you're not understanding. I clearly become more conscious now that I am arguing based off choice because I haven't slowed down the process, embraced the feeling, look, and now listen.
Mm. I I really, this is necessary, and I needed you in my 20s. Like, maybe I needed to come to where you were on a trip or something and bump into you, but and it's not that my communication style was so bad. It was I would get caught up trying to get someone to understand what I was saying and not what I was feeling. That has been the most recurring issue in my life. Because I'm not saying I'm without feelings. I know how to separate them in my own life, for my own self, in my own space. But I keep getting people hearing feelings. And I'm like, what is going, like, what is, and I would slow myself down, but I wouldn't know how to reciprocate that. Like, I wouldn't know how to put that back on you or to understand where you're coming from. And so the advice you just gave, once we go, I think you said once we slow down the motion and get into that space, I start hearing things that I don't like. Well, in arguments, and I normally hear what somebody is really saying versus what I thought they were saying or what I thought they were feeling. And that's just in my interpersonal relationships. When it comes to being a teacher, I think the difficulty in this is trying to do this for a classroom full of students. So now I didn't even think about what I just saw when you said it was simply separate your classroom. Simply, if it's just that simple of a matter, if I know all my visual learners are over here, I know all my so and so learners over here, and that probably will help them to learn better because now they're in a space with people who learn how they learn. So the people around them are communicating with them and translating with them in a way that they are in their best space. And I never thought about separating the class in that way. Normally, we separate our classrooms between behavioral issues
Mhm.
and those things. But even when we do that, that person's still gonna be sitting next to somebody that may learn differently than them, which will spark another conflict.
Exactly.
So
Because
we go
experience
ahead.
this process. Now we're getting to the point where we're not going into the subject, we're going into what's keeping them from being able to do the subject, meeting them where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So with you separating the class into visuals, feeling, auditorials, and process, right? So now
Mm-hmm.
you have the different type of learners. But within those different type of learners, there are different type of teachers. So not only are you going to have to separate them into the four categories, but within
Mm-hmm.
inside of that four, you're going to have to compartmentalize the auditorial teachers, the visual teachers, the step-by-step teachers, and the feeling teachers inside of that box. So then you know that all of this side is visual, but I also could tell when I'm asking a question how to translate the answer because I know this person's visual learner, but auditorial. So I know when they're talking, they're going to give the information they're going to give the value of the information. Or
Whew.
this person talking, they're going to give the visual information of the information. This person talking, they're going to give the way the information is experienced, and this person going to give only the steps into the steps into the information. So therefore, you're now having a whole symphony. It's like a symphony orchestra,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and now you're starting to experience this process. Every student learning with each other because if they're next to ones that understand and learn like they learn, they no longer feel alone. And when they're discussing the subject matter, they are getting involved in the group discussion as a class now because the persons around them are understanding it just like they understand and they're connecting.
Mm.
And
And
now it comes
that's what I
together
could
for
see
you.
when you were saying that. I
Mm,
really that's how I can clearly see that picture. But I'm gonna tell you, as you introduce and I don't want to speak for you, but I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. Your hope is to integrate this into school systems,
right.
and
Yeah, that's
your
one of
biggest
the main
issue
places.
principals are going to love this, administrators are going to love this, School board is going to love this. Teacher unions are going to hate this, and union teachers are going to hate this because it appears to add a new layer of work because now instead of me jumping into my lesson plans and getting to know my students how I naturally get to know them, now I have to separate and I have to meet my, because a lot of that work is typically done before they even meet the children. Like where the children are going to sit, I make a chart and I make, and make those decisions within that first day. But this is something that will have to be, it's going to take that week to be able to learn each one of those students. And some of our classrooms can have up to 35 students in it. And when you get to a collegiate level, it may be more than that. In those lecture halls, it could fit, 50 to 100 students in it. So it's really gonna take a lot of discipline. And that's what I'm hearing when you say this. I'm hearing another level of discipline being added to a structure that has gotten so lazy specifically, and that's across the board, not even just in the school system, but we've gotten lazy as parents. We've gotten lazy as friends or in romantic relationships when it comes to communication. So this is going to take a level of understanding and patience that we aren't used to having. How do we get ourselves to that level? Now, you telling people stop eating sugar, that's going to be a fight, sir.
Listen to this process, organize this process, experience this process, watch this process. I would say take the first step by adding this herb called ginkgo to your diet and taking GABA. And,
Ginkgo, is that the ginkgo biloba, or am I saying it
mhm,
right?
increases memory.
Okay.
Because when
And
you increase the memory and when applying this process, it becomes more easier because you are able to retain more information. And
mm,
GABA gives you control over your behavior.
say the second one again.
GABA,
GABA.
hmm
Okay.
it gives you control over your behavior. So it helps you deal with the impulses and the aggravation. So increasing your memory while also increasing amino acid GABA that is produced in the body is stripped out of the body when we eat processed sugar. By replenishing that in, you have more patience and more. It gives you more patience. You don't be irritated so quickly, and then your memory is increased. So then this strengthens this ability because it does require discipline, but it seems like it's hard only because of the diet in which we're eating, which is having us on this shallow breathing, fast paced aspect. So if I'm telling you to move a couple of bricks and you're super hyper, you're not going to want to do them because you're looking at, you want to be going really fast, and just really fast energy is not going to get this job done. So you got to get on an energy signal that allows you to do tenacious type of work. So this gives you the
Yeah.
ability to get into the sequence of utilizing energy available to you to do tenacious work. This society has us on a high processed sugary diet to have a shallow breathing, always in the impulse rush, so we don't get to the understanding of completing tasks of this type of excellence.
And basically, I mean, it may not be so first of the first week of class. This may take you that school year to kind of get that in a rhythm where you can just identify and you can begin to translate what you're teaching and how you learn to teaching your students effectively. So they because part of the process is I show you, we do it together, and then you show me. So that's the typical format for a lot of teachers, but I don't see this being
Experience
as
this process.
easy. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It doesn't. We got to look at it like this: experience this process. The traditional standard format is we organize the students based off behavior. We forcefully try to get them to learn something that they don't know, but we're not meeting them where they are, which causes a lot of confusion and frustration. And the lesson plan that was presented, half of it is not even learned, and we're calling this a complete school year.
Mm,
Versus starting off in the beginning by asking the students their learning, their teaching styles, compartmentalizing and organizing them in the classroom as such,
mm-hmm.
communicating to them in this manner, where everything you teach actually is being learned, and then the children are giving back to you a centralized intelligence that help you even evolve to a higher consciousness in the lesson that's being taught, because it's information that's inside of that information that once we use this style, we understand that the books couldn't give it. And within this communication style, one lesson that you teach will open up so many possibilities of hidden information that not only will you that once that opens up, will it cover everything that you can discuss in that book, but also things that that book wasn't able to discover because it didn't actually apply, because this is the technique that decodes that which is put into multitudes of words and put you right into the center aspect of it. And you have more abundant information within that school year than that book could ever give. One subject will turn, when you're communicating that in this part, one subject will explain the whole entire book. And then the aspect which was not even communicated. So your school year will be based off of geniusness, because them children are going to, not only are you going to be communicating to them accurately, but then they're going to be communicating to you that they're learning it, and you're going to experience the geniusness in them and honing that ability that you're going to surpass the qualification of what excellent is, because simply you have met them where they are, and now you're talking to the God within them.
So okay, so how I'm understanding what you're saying, translating into my experience, I've been teaching elementary school for the last couple years. And the last year I've been teaching pre-K specifically. If you've ever been around a pre-K age child, they are sponges. Now, I think everybody has that ability, but I think what we do with pre-K students is what you're basically saying in the different learning styles, we learn those things about pre-K kindergarten students, and we teach them based on that. And the older the child gets, by the time they get to the first grade, we stop doing those steps. And then you start seeing a different child evolve, unless that child naturally has a way of learning and teaching themselves. The child begins to lose those elements once they get to the first grade, because the teacher isn't as hands on, and they're not thinking about their learning capabilities as much as what I'm trying to convey to them. I have these lessons I need to teach to them. But we see in pre-K and kindergarten that children are able to learn things far beyond their years, because we break it down into steps where they're individually getting it and on their learning style. How do what you're saying and what I just said, how can we do that consistently with children and in our communication relationships, where we're kind of bringing those steps back to people? Because this will be beneficial to people at a ground level or at a certain age, but how do we get the elders and the youngsters and everybody in between to kind of get on the same space with this, on the same level, in terms of retaining this type of information?
Experience this process is going to come from like what we're doing now,
Mm-hmm.
communicating it, putting it out there. It's gonna come from what you're doing, making it visual so people can actually see the works of it, from another person who teaches experience, that provides the feeling of it, that
Mm-hmm.
gets you to feel it, in a person like me that's step by step, that breaks it down, and a person that's auditorial, that's good at communicating the value of why this is important. So it's going to
Okay.
take all of the four aspects to come together, in order to do it. That's what they were trying to teach us in Power Rangers and stuff like that, and Captain Planet and stuff like that. This is where they were communicating. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to take all of the different aspects to come together up under the same collective, what we would call the culture, the knowledge
Mm-hmm.
center. And that's what gets it done. It's just everybody doing their part. Me doing my part. I'm teaching them. I'm breaking it down. I'm putting it in motion. You taking it and creating a Picasso.
Mm-hmm.
Another person knowing how to get people involved, letting them know what take touch it, experience. This is what it feels like. Another person very excellent of creating the value, putting
Mm-hmm.
value to it. But it's just everybody doing their part. So it's not really like it's one thing that we can do. It's just once it's delivered to you, once you understand it and you get the importance of it, is doing what it takes in your life to bring that into it, not simply for the collective whole of I want people to know, but simply doing it for peace within your own life, control within your own life, for you to experience and others will see that and then gravitate and question how is it that you're doing what I'm seeing you doing, because you're doing something that I knew was possible, but and I'm witnessing, seeing this.
Right.
I'm just trying to understand, how am I seeing this? How is it possible that I'm seeing this?
Mm.
How can I see something that I didn't know could be possibly seen? I'm seeing it though. How did you create, how did you get me to see this? Show me, explain to me, get me involved in how how to be able to show this to everybody, you
That's
know.
basically what I'm saying to you right now, because being taught how to teach, being, you know, learning what my pedagogy is now as an adult, becoming aware of my learning style differently than when I was as a child. I think I kept messaging you, and I was like, I basically I need to know, how did you put this in my head this way? Because it's so clear. It's difficult. The struggle in it isn't going to necessarily change until you get it in your rhythm. But being able to see communication from this basic level, the fundamental levels, is I see so much changing because of it. I see so much miscommunication and lost in translation happening. But as we come to a close, I definitely want to work on making this more of a interactive class. And this was our first one, and it's my fault we started an hour later. So um, hopefully, if we do this again, we can get it at a better time, as we first planned. Um, but I want to, one, how do people contact you if they want more information on this, or if they want to bring it to their school system, or their classroom? How do people contact you? And then how do people contact you in general?
But they can they can contact me. My phone number is 205-253-3924. They can contact me on there. You send me a text message. You can Gmail me at takeeslam@gmail.com. You can contact me on Instagram at Taqee on Instagram. You can contact me on Facebook at Get Rid of Any. I got a Facebook page called Get Rid of Any Disease on Facebook. I pretty much just teach people how to reverse diseases, all diseases, what we're
Mm-hmm.
eating, what herbs to eat, different aspects, how to make our bodies become more energetic in positions to facilitate this type of information. So I give those out in I'm located in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm willing to travel, and teach. And I give a couple of classes here. I give classes on trails. So, if I go to your city, if you're into hiking, we could go on a hike. And then I break down this information during hikes. Those tend to be good too, because being around nature, around things that God created, does things to the visual aspect of our environments where it gives us the ability to think more natural, because
Mm-hmm.
everything around us is of naturalness. We can't change the channel and flip it. It is exactly what it is: the cloud, the tree, the dirt, the animals, you know. So I do those as well, and then I go into classroom settings and do it too. So yeah, those are the ways to contact me. And yeah, I'm happy to be a part. I want this information out desperately. I wish it could have been out a long time ago, especially for myself. I made so many mistakes in life because
Mm-hmm.
and so much self-hatred
Mm-hmm.
and so much abuse is going on in this world because we don't know this and we're trying to make others
Yeah.
be like in process and think and learn the way that we learn because we don't know that there's a world outside of our world that is totally on in different alignments, but yet it is still the same.
Yeah.
Everybody's learning, everybody's teaching, everybody's memorizing or has thinking, and everybody's present moment. So we're collectively all the same. But the symbols and the positions on how we use that, that's the
Mm.
part. That's the part.
The
That's the
journey is
translation.
different, even though the destination may be the same.
Right. And once we understand thinking, if I like when you ask me the question, like how do you get to the translation? How do you get to the part where you can understand that part? And I was saying
Mm-hmm.
slow down, then get involved in that, slow down, then look at it, then hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I was going within myself for what it is that I do, but if I would communicate it in my form, then I was like, well, you gotta feel yourself, relax. But when I'm saying feel, I'm saying think. But you don't
Mm-hmm.
use feeling to think. You use movement to think. So I had to say slow down for you, which I
Right.
would have normally said get relaxed for me. And
Okay.
then I would have said and listen. But you don't use your ability to listen to learn. You use listening to exist in the present. You use your feelings to learn. So that's why I'd say after you slow it down, get involved. So I say get involved for you. What I would say listen for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, it would have been like, um, now, you know what I'm saying, you know what I'm saying, it would have been more slow down because then it's patterns for me, the
Mm-hmm.
rhythm. But then I have to use watch for you
Mm-hmm.
because that'll be that's where your place is. And then I would have said, then I had to say and listen at the end.
Mm-hmm.
For
Mm-hmm.
me, it would have been now look.
Right.
So this is what I mean by we're all the same, but we have to acknowledge the way the placements is and chew and speak in the language in which those placements are, though we know what they represent, logic. So now I can describe to you how I do things within myself
Mm-hmm.
because I know if it took me to think, then this, I can tell the way the energy move, and I just translate that same coding to you in the form in which yours exists in, and automatically you understand it.
I really appreciate you for being open to teaching, because some when we get to this level of understanding within ourselves, and even if we're able to teach it, we still become very selective as to, and very particular about who we want to teach it to. And that's ultimately our problem, how I see it. We don't want to share the information, or we're using the knowledge, the wisdom, the information as a weapon and not as a tool. And immediately when we spoke the first time, and we was on a totally different topic, and this guy kind of got inserted in that, it really made me stop and listen, because I this is something that I wanted to fulfill, something that I wanted to fix in my communication with others. Because I'm an artist, and I'm typically one of the only artists in the room sometimes. People perception of what they think an artist thinks or feels, or their professionalism, whatever, gets, stuck in translation. So you perceive me, but without even listening to me. So I've always wanted to effectively communicate better and to a more diverse group of people at one time. So that as an artist, as an actor, as a teacher, as a radio personality, I communicate already, but I just want to learn how to effectively do that as a tool for others to receive versus a weapon. When you get new information and you learn something, it becomes now a weapon towards other people, and I don't like that process in us culturally. But in this last minute, the last question that I typically ask all my guests on any platform I'm in: what advice would you give to your 17-year-old self, and what question would you ask to your 100-year-old self? Not to necessarily change anything, but maybe to soften the blow a little bit.
Experience this process. If I was to ask my 17-year-old self a question,
No, what advice would you give to
oh,
your 17-year-old self, And what question would you ask to your 100-year-old self?
Okay, experience this process. If I was to give any advice to my 17-year-old self, I would say the person that you want to love you is not the person you are getting to know in the beginning. The person you are learning in the beginning is the person that likes you. If you want to know the person who is going to love you, watch how that person treats the ones they already love.
Okay. Sophisticated truth. Okay. And what question would you ask to your 100-year-old self?
Experience this process. At this point, I will ask my 100-year-old self, what is it that I am to do about not knowing as much as I should?
He trying to get more wishes out of the genie. He not slick. But this has been, I guess, step one in communication into translation. Just a deeper thought into how we communicate, how we translate, what we're learning from each other, how we teach. And then it moves beyond that. What you're eating, how your health is, all those things in combined. I want you to definitely follow this gentleman on his social media. I gave you his Instagram, but you can also find him. Give us your social media one more time.
So Instagram, Taqee Salaam, Facebook, get rid of any disease on Facebook. Um, yeah.
So definitely follow this gentleman. He has some great advice. I'm going to try to make this into something where we can give him a platform to be able to do this more often or on his schedule. And thank you all for listening. We're going to share this out. I'm going to put the rest of his information in the subject boxes of this YouTube and Facebook live we did. So thank you again, sir. Hold on one second, and we're going to be out.
Thank you.